change risk calculation and change collision detection within Alemba Service Manager Core. There are now two ways in which you can manage change risk assessment within the solution. And this is all fully managed within the workflow management area of the system administration features. As you can see on the left-hand side, I have request risk assessment matrix selected. And within here, what we can do is we can define the impact and the complexity to output the relevant risk. So above the risk assessment matrix here, you'll see I have impact and complexity, whereby customers can fully configure the relevant impact and complexity, similar to that of impact and urgency, to output the incident priority on an incident record. Now again, within the risk assessment matrix, you can then output the relevant risk determined by the impact and the complexity across the top of the screen. Within the screen designer itself, within the change, you can now add on the impact and the complexity to then output the ultimate risk of that specific change. So that's the first way in which you can manage change risk assessment based upon a predefined risk assessment matrix. The next way is to manage request risks in the context of a structured question and answers, which analysts or change management can define and output based upon the change that's being logged. And you can output score ratios dependent on what questions are actually given for the specific changes. So within the request risks area of the workflow management security feature, what you're able to do is define the appropriate request risks. So in this scenario, we have minor, moderate, and major. And what you can then do is you can output the actual score range in which the system will determine whether the change is of a minor, moderate, or major risk. So here for a minor change, we have 0 to 99. For moderate, we have 100 to 199, and for major, 200 to 999. And the default risk that will be applied to any change is always set to minor again, which is fully configurable. Now, if we navigate to the screen designer and I scroll down on my change form itself, you'll see I have a section to determine the risk assessment, of which I have 4 questions, and then finally I have the request risk itself. Now, if I select a question, this essentially can be any question that the customer would like to pose based upon the change record for different types of changes, or a tiered structure of questions for any specific change whatsoever. So essentially what you can do is you can create new fields, and then you can use a new calculate value field to output how the actual change risk assessment is determined. So for the scope of change question, what I can do is for the risk question 1, I can edit it. And how these are defined are through drop-down menus, of which you can then allocate the answer based upon the change. So for affects a small minority of people, the output is of score 0. For the affects a group of people or significant business area, the score is 50. And for affects a large group of people or a vital business area, then the score is 100. You can then again create as little or as many questions as you like to determine the actual change risk output. So again, if I now select impact if the change fails, you'll notice we now have risk question 2. And if I edit it, again, we have similar scoring scenarios, but this time slightly differently. So can work, but performance or quality affected, cannot perform work within the solution, or functions are severely limited, and unable to work whatsoever. Now, once you've defined all of your questions and the appropriate scores based upon the selection from the drop-down menu, you then have your calculated change risk assessment attribute. So again, if we now select that, you'll notice that I have the calculate value field, which is now set to be checked. And if I select the actual icon, what I can then do is I can select the relevant questions of which the actual score would then be calculated. So based upon the risk question 1, 2, 3, and 4, and my actual matrices where I have my score output, the system will determine, based upon all of the scores that are given for the question, the appropriate risk for the risk of the change itself. So in reality, what does that look like? If we exit out of the change request itself, and I were to log a brand new change, Obviously, we can still give it a summary and insert who's requesting the change. We can then add the service details, so the service being changed, service affected, config items being changed. So if I select service and any applicable config items, what you'll now see is the change collision detection has been initiated. So again, this is a configurable feature which can be toggled on and off within the system administration. So what this really is about is determining to change management the impact on the infrastructure and whether there are currently any schedule conflicts within the system that have already been logged for scheduled changes. And this utilizes RAG methodology. So right now for the email support service, you'll see I have an amber indicator. So what this is actually telling us is that for the email support service, there is actually a change currently logged, but right now the implementation start and implementation end dates currently do not conflict with the current change that I'm logging. Should it actually directly conflict with the relevant date ranges for the current change and any other change that is scheduled, this would dynamically change from amber to red. So again, you can really visually see straight away what impact on the actual infrastructure there would be, but also whether there's any conflicts within the scheduling of changes as well. Scrolling down to the bottom, obviously we can output our type of change, the target date for the particular change. So if we insert date and when we want it to start and end, we can then output our risk assessment answers. So for the scope of change, again, as we just saw within the screen designer, what options are available. So if we say it affects a small group of people or minor business area, we're also going to say that the user can work, but performance or quality is affected. The level of complexity is low, and the outage required to implement of backup is no as well. So you'll notice that essentially the minor calculated change risk assessment output hasn't changed. However, if we now say that the user is unable to work and the level of complexity is medium, you'll now see that this is now jumping up. So we've now moved from the minor change risk assessment to moderate. And if finally I say that there is going to be an outage, you'll now see it's gone to major change. Now, obviously, then you can go forward and input the scope of change, impact assessment, testing results, backup plans, and so on and so forth. But for the purposes of showcasing this functionality, I'm just going to hit save. And what the system will then do is if we just locate our change record and we go to the change workflow, it will then output the relevant risk based upon the actual risk assessment itself. So here, if we'd have been a minor change, minor risk, it would have gone to the one minor risk approver. If it had been moderate, we would have had sequential moderate risk approvers. And because it's a major, it's now dynamically gone to the major risk approver from the actual risk assessment conditional branch. So again, really easy to now manipulate and visualize whether you currently have any schedule conflicts directly from a change that's being logged, and likewise to output a relevant change risk assessment based upon configurable question and answer criteria, which can be fully amended and configured within the Alemba Service Manager screen design.